So when it comes to spec work specifically, don't focus on the gear, just focus on production design, getting actual like color contrast in there with the proper styling or something like that. And then really focus on the bare bones of what it means to be a cinematographer and how to shape light. A lot of like my best looking work has just been minimal setup. Negative fill, one light, couple MCs, just figuring it out. Because I feel like that's the real creativity comes when it comes to filmmaking, especially
when you have to be scrappy.
And I'm thinking about when Tenfold first started and all the specs that we were doing, we just had unlimited time on our hands. Because we were just like, we need to create things so we can build a production company.
Always look to the people you have available to yourself, right? It's honestly, a strong network is always more valuable than whatever amount of money, whatever amount of budget you're gonna have.
But when it comes to reaching out to people, you have to have some value for them to benefit.
What is up, everyone? Welcome back to the Unfold podcast. Today I'm joined again by
Zachary Guy,
the great cinematographer Zachary Guy. And today we're gonna be talking about something that really helped Zach accelerate his career in cinematography. And that thing is
spec work.
And
more importantly, where to invest money in the right places when it comes to spec work.
Yeah, and that's such a great point. I feel like spec work is one of those things that sounds great on paper, but then like you actually start to do it, and then there's this huge barrier to entry.
A huge barrier. So yeah, I'm excited to talk about it.
So I feel like one of the biggest barriers of entry for a lot of people is, well, there's like a lot, but one of the biggest things is gear, I feel like, for myself, because you always see that commercial look, you know what I mean? Has those like nice, clean lensings and beautiful lighting and all that stuff. And you look at that and you're like, how am I supposed to even get close to achieving a look like this?
It seems so like far away.
It seems so far. It seems so expensive is like the biggest thing.
And it is.
It is.
Right? So.
But is it?
Yeah, when we could talk about spec work, especially, I know you're asking my opinion, especially as a cinematographer. And I wish I'd put this into practice earlier, is that a lot of people are going to tell you like, oh, it's about the gear. It's not about the gear.
Yeah.
Back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. I will admit there is like a barrier to entry when it comes to filmmaking. There's money involved and everything like that. But, when I talk about this on the YouTube all the time, it's just like, if I had to choose a perfect camera, what would it be? It'd be the Sony FX3. Day in, day out. Doesn't matter what the production, if I only had to choose one thing, because it's going to be give me the most versatile image, as well as just able to put that camera on anything that I can, no matter the project, right? Obviously, I own a Venice. I'd love to shoot on that all the time, but sometimes it really doesn't call for that because it's just too much. And then I'd love to shoot on Alexa all the time, and it just doesn't necessarily make sense for the workflow and the amount of shots I have to get. But that's just talking about commercials. But when we talk about spec and gear and money, especially, because at that point you're investing so much into making a commercial that necessarily defines you, especially even yourself if you're a cinematographer at this point, and you're like, yeah, I want to shoot this on Alexa, I want to shoot this on a nice set of lenses and everything like that. But the reality is like, that's not what you're shooting. You should be like focusing on. You should be focusing on the story, how you can be intentional with the shots and dynamic lighting that you want to create, and then mainly focus on the skills of what makes a good cinematographer. Because it's funny, one of my go-to things whenever I just want to shoot something for myself, or if I'm packing for an Italy trip and I'm going to be there for a week with my partner Sophia, and then we're planning to shoot a little travel film as well, like the best thing that I have in my kit is my Sigma 24-70 art lens.
Classic lens.
It's a classic lens. And I've even talked to Charlie about this, who works here at Tenfold, and he's a cinematographer as well. And he's like, yo, that lens is so clean and I don't understand why. And it's just an amazing lens and I absolutely love it. And I've shot a lot of commercials and stuff in the past, and people are like, yo, how'd you do that? I'm like, it's usually 24-70. It's a great lens and it's a great kit to have, and I can get away with a lot of things because I know, and I've matured as a cinematographer to figure out what makes an image good. obviously when we talk about cinematography, it's interest, getting a good composition, getting lights and dark parts of your image so you can create that contrast. And you don't need necessarily a lot of lights to do that. You're just going to utilize locations that just have that, that you can just add in small lights, negative fill, bounces, and just things to get, you know, light going in the places that you need. You don't need a full grip truck to do that.
Yeah.
A lot of like my best looking work has just been minimal setup. Negative fill, one light, couple MCs, you know, just figuring it out. Because I feel like that's the real creativity comes when it comes to filmmaking, especially
when you have to be scrappy.
Yes, then that's exactly it. Because because there's been times where you have so much gear and so much things, and you're like, yes, this is going to be it. Then you get stuck in analysis paralysis of like, I have so much. What do I use?
Yeah.
What is here?
It's like the most optimal setup right now.
Yeah, but when you're stuck with your tried and true 24-70 and a few lights, you're like, we're gonna figure this out.
Just do it, yo.
we're gonna get a little jank with this, and that's when the true creative problem solving comes into play. So when we talk about the original question and spec work and stuff like that, is like, don't invest that money into gear. Obviously, you're gonna need a basis, and I always recommend like a Sony FX3. But if you can get your hands on a Blackmagic Pocket 4K, those cameras are dirt cheap at this point, Pocket 6K and everything, that will give you enough information to give to a proper colorist or somebody who's in the field who just does coloring. And like, that is the way to go. I remember I just recently have a conversation with Gabriel, who's an Italian student that just came here to chase his dreams when it comes to cinematography. And then his main thing when it came to that, he's like, I didn't realize that I can't be good at everything.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? You're probably at this point too, where you're like, oh, I can just edit.
Yeah.
I can just direct. I can just color it and post as well too. But then think about that. If you're like a one-man band and you want to do the pre-pro, you want to direct and shoot, and then you want to edit, and then you want to color, that's 5 things. And then and if you think about your time as 100%, that's 100 divided by 5, 20%.
Yeah.
You're only putting 20% of your effort into those things because you're thinking about so many other things. And then obviously when you're in the coloring process and that's the end and something like that, you could say, no, I'm putting 100% effort into that. No, there's going to be somebody who's always going to be better at it. Even if you specialize and want to get into color, you're going to be better at somebody who's not just spreading themselves thin. So when it comes to spec work specifically, don't focus on the gear, just focus on production design, getting actual like color contrast in there with like proper styling or something like that. And then really focus on the bare bones of what it means to be a cinematographer and how to shape light.
Yeah.
I feel like that's always been my biggest advantage when it comes to these things. Hey guys, it's Zach. I really hope that you're enjoying this conversation. And if I look back on Tenfold as a business, the biggest thing that has put us ahead is spec work. And that's why we created Cinematic Portfolio Mastery. In this live series of masterclasses, Jason is going to take you through the exact process that Tenfold approaches spec work. If you guys are looking to take your career to the next level by creating a portfolio defining piece, I personally invite you to Cinematic Portfolio Mastery. Check out the link below, but let's get back to the conversation.
Yeah, and I never want to discourage anyone from doing spec as well, because I feel like even if you can't afford a cine camera, whether you're working on like a DSLR, which is how I started, or even like at the bare minimum, if you have a phone that can shoot video, you are more than capable of shooting something. And that is always better than nothing. But I think there's something to be said of like, you don't always need to shoot for the stars. That's always I think an even bigger barrier. Anything that's going to make you say no is going to be a barrier for you doing it.
100%.
Right? And one of the biggest things for me was always, I have this big dream of what I want this spec commercial to be, because I want this to define myself. But oftentimes, if there's so many barriers for you in doing that, you kind of got to take a step backwards and look at it and be like, have you even done enough tech specs to do this? Yeah. Have you done enough technical specs to be at this level of what you want to execute your big dream? You know what I mean?
Yeah, I feel like that's like the concept that you're saying is that you have to be real with yourself. You know what I mean? If you're at the point, and you have to be like very self-aware of like where you are at your stage of your career. Yeah. Because I, made the mistake in terms of like seeing a lot of people at work and like, I want to do that. I'm going to try and replicate that. And then you just have these high expectations because you don't necessarily know what's behind that curtain. Yeah. You know what I mean? And then you're setting yourself up for failure because it's never going to be that, because you just don't have the means to do it. But if you can scale it down to something that you have access to and that you can actually do, and then at your skill level, that's more than enough.
Yeah.
Right.
I always use this analogy. I love this analogy, but all of this stuff is just like working out or going to the gym.
Putting your reps in.
You know what I mean? Because you think about it and you just like picture all those like burly dudes, those muscular dudes in the gym and like hitting crazy PRs, and you're like, oh, bro, I can't do that.
It's the exact same thing. That's
It's impossible for me to do that. But then like you make all of these, not excuses, but you make all of these barriers in your mind, and you're never gonna get into the gym, and you're never gonna even lift that 5-pound, 10-pound dumbbell. You're never gonna make that first step. So there's no shame in taking a step back and being real with yourself and being like, I can't make this huge spec commercial yet. Even if it is just a spec, it's hard. It is hard work. It takes a lot. But, you know, scale it back down, see like what you could actually do, and take that first step first.
Yeah. And I feel like a lot of people don't necessarily talk about technical specs because people do it all the time. I do it still all the time of like, just even if it's one shot, you know what I mean? And it takes you 4 hours. You can probably recreate that shot anytime now in the span of maybe 30 minutes.
Yeah.
But because you took that time to put in the reps, put in the work, and now that time span is shortened and you can apply it to, you know, a real world scenario, that is totally worth it. Because there's times now where I'll have to I'll have to previs things to see if they're going to work because I don't necessarily have the confidence or skill to do that. And that's totally okay.
Yeah.
Like I'm in the stage of my career now where I look at something and the director's like, yeah, we need to get this shot. And I'm like, you know,
Yeah.
I don't go like that, but I'm just like, I don't say no automatically. I'm like, no, I can't do that because I know it's out of my skill range or something like that. But I'm like, let's see how we can do that. How can I apply myself to do something like that? There was a commercial that we were recently working on, and there was a lot of specialty rigging that we needed to get involved. And then Jason, the director at that point, was like, yeah, I want this product attached to the camera, and then I want a lot of perspectives that are different. So I'm like, oh, this is gonna be a lot of work.
Yeah.
Right. And I wasn't like, no, I can't do that because it's just like, we don't have the time, budget, and means to do that. But no, I really relied on what I'm good at, my strengths. And fortunately, I have access to 3D printers and design and everything that I've used in my engineering degree. So I built so many different rigs for that one commercial. And then they adapted over time. Like it was days before set, and I was testing out so many different prototypes just to get those shots to see if they would work. And there's so many, you probably saw me in the studio so many times of figuring out all these rigs and just testing and testing and testing and testing, right? Because I could have hired somebody else to do it, but just the means of the budget and everything, we didn't. But that in itself was its own technical spec as well, because now I have that experience to know exactly how to pull those shots off in the future and apply it to something else.
Yeah. And always going back to, I always try and like go back to where I started when I think about stuff like this, because you learn so much and your brain gets filled with so much knowledge and experience that's kind of hard to remember what it was like when you had nothing or when you thought you had nothing.
Of course.
You know what I mean? But I think the biggest thing is if you are at a place where maybe you don't even have that DSLR, right? And you want to do something bigger and you know that you're capable of, you might not be able to front the money. You might not have the financial power to do it, but always look to the people you have available to yourself, right? It's honestly, a strong network is always more valuable than whatever amount of money, whatever amount of budget you're going to have.
Oh yeah. People, I like to say that like time is way more valuable than money, and especially other people's time too. And if like you have that relationship with somebody who's willing to invest time with you, that's one of the biggest things that you can get, right? Because I even look at it myself right now, and I have access to basically anything that I can shoot when it comes to gear.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like we have a bunch of DZO lenses in-house. I have access to a Venice FX3, a bunch of rigging, lighting to get any small commercial done. But for me right now, I don't have time to do that. You know what I mean? Like, and then a lot of people come to me because they know that I have the technical know-how to execute ideas, because they have the time to flush out their ideas. And then that means I can really dial in on what that is. And I'm thinking about when, you know, Tenfold first started and all the specs that we were doing, we just had unlimited time on our hands.
Yeah.
Because we were just like, we need to create things so we can, you know, build a production company. And now it's just like, you know, we shoot specs every so often. While before it was all the time because we saw our time was so valuable, and that's what we just invested in because we just knew that we were on the right path.
Yeah. And did you find that doing all of those specs were helpful in the immediate future at that time? What was the big payoff of doing all of
this
those?
is a huge thing, because I even talked about this in an earlier episode, where you won't see the payoff immediately at all. When you think about like, oh, creating work and then getting hired from that work, no. Expect that maybe 6 months to a year, because people will see that and they'll remember. And then, like, you know, you have to be constantly putting things out. You just can't put one thing out. But the immediate benefit was, of course, the technical skill.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like the practice, the reps, and putting all that stuff in. Then, you know, when you start shooting your first spec, you're going to be shooting a lot. And you're going to be kind of like, yes, figuring it out of like what your style is, and then just like getting so much coverage in a scene and then playing it out in the edit and see how that works. But then as time goes on, I'm very intentional with my shots. You know what I mean? It's just like, we want this. It's, you know, ironed out even more in the pre-production process. And I just have this, I can't explain it. I just have this feeling of like, yes, we're going to use that, and no, we're not going to use that.
Yeah.
And I'm not stuck to that where I have like a thing of like, no, we're not going to need that. Let's not even bother shooting it. You'll just see it and you'll be like, this doesn't make sense. Let's move on.
Yeah.
Like, scrap this entirely. Right. And then that's just a bank of experience, a bank of specs that I've shot, a bank of mistakes I've made. And that's the biggest thing. I've made so many mistakes than rather compared to successes. And I've said this so many times. And if you have the willingness to fail, that will take you a lot more further than just being stuck on ideas.
Do you have any actionable pieces of advice right now for anyone who maybe might have been motivated by this conversation to pursue a tech or a spec?
Yeah, I just feel like it's easy to look at things like we said before, and it's just like, it's easy to get demoralized. Even like looking at the work that I do now, it's just like, I can't imagine myself 7 years looking at that and being like, oh yeah, you're going to end up like that. No, one day I'm like, what?
Yeah.
No, I can barely set up a shot in 4 hours. You know what I mean? If you're looking for some actionable steps to improve your cinematography or just get more involved in your filmmaking career, you just have to take them small. You can't take the big steps. You got to work on the technical things. You got to learn how to light things. You got to learn how to work with the gear that you have, because your career is going to be in stages. If I look back and, like I said before, I'm like, oh, you're going to co-own Sony Venice with your partner in 7 years. I'm like, what? Me? Right? And it's just like, I started off with my phone. Then I bought an A7 III, then an A7S III, and then I kind of made a side lateral step to get an FX3, and then Sony Venice. You know what I mean? It was like a linear path in terms of what was going, but I maximized at every step of what I could achieve with that, whatever I had. My phone, whatever lights I had, and then, you know, A7 III, whatever I had of that, I maximized it. I didn't just go chasing the gear and automatically and go for that, you know, because that's what people can do. Obviously, yes, we said that there's a barrier to entry, but you have to work within your own means.
Yeah.
You can't just spend 10 G's on some equipment, but you don't have the basis knowledge of it. So that's why you have to start small, work within your means, and really practice on the technical details of like why things are done that way, how to do things and stuff like that.
Great. And do you have any advice on like reaching out to people or expanding your network?
Reaching out to people, I feel like I don't have a lot of expertise in this, but, you know, looking at the beginning parts of my career and stuff like that, I had people already kind of in my network, and I just knew people through somebody else. Like the story, if I go into my go-to gaffer, Jordan, he was doing like his videography career as well, but he was more on the gaffing side. And I only knew him through one of my best friends, Curtis, because they went to school together. And then he's like, oh, you guys are in the film world, why don't you connect? And then we just had a random conversation at Curtis's house one night, and he's like, I want to get into this. I'm like, oh, I want to get into this. Let's see how we can work together, right? So that was just something that's naturally happened, and this was over friend groups over 10 years, and then luckily we were just in the starting stages of our career. But when it comes to reaching out to people, you have to have some value for them to benefit from any situation. I feel like, unfortunately, that's just how things work.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? If we just say bluntly, black and white, you have to benefit. If I'm reaching out to you and you're a colorist or editor that I really want to work with because I like your work, there has to be some sort of benefit. You know, you already have to be at the similar stage in your career. You're not going to shoot for the stars. I'm not going to ask for like Tyler the Creator's colorist on a project that I just started. You know what I mean? You're just going to look for the people in the same skill level as you. And then you're going to say like, hey, working on this project, you have to present yourself. You have to present something with that to say like, would love to collaborate on with you with this so we can have both of a portfolio piece. You know, this is the direction I want to push. And I hope you have to find those people who are willing to do the same thing, because it's going to be hit and miss with everything, right?
At the end of the day, everyone's looking to improve their portfolio as well.
Yeah,
right?
and you hope that you're gonna find a lot of people that you can work with, but you're also gonna find a lot of people that you just can't work with.
And that's important as well.
Yeah, obviously enter each conversation positive, but there's a lot of people that you're gonna be able to work with, and a lot of people that you just the vibe isn't there. That you're just gonna clash in terms of things that you like that they like, and vice versa, and stuff like that. So that goes into another tip: is find somebody with a similar style to you.
Yeah.
And that's a big one, right? When we first started, Jason and I have a very similar style of what we like. And then if you look at Justin's work, it's a very different style because it's more like narrative and stuff like that. I like flashy things. I like cool things that, you know what I mean? In terms of telling stories. Well, that's why we like the same things, and it worked out.
Yeah, that's great. I think that's a pretty good place to end off the conversation.
Yeah, I think so too.
A little bit shorter today, but still pretty value packed. If you guys are looking to do your own spec work or technical spec, feel free to give out Cinematic Portfolio Mastery a check. We'll leave it linked in the description and the comments below. And if you guys have any questions, anything you want to hear us talk about, leave it in the comments as well.
And then even if you have any specific questions for me, leave them in the comments below. I'm pretty much an open book when it comes to this stuff.
Yeah. Anyways, have a great rest of your day. We'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.
Peace.